Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So today we're making hats. Now we definitely need hats for the dolls to wear currently, but I also wanted to make a few pieces because I'm excited and inspired by Aunt Janie and Aunt Bess's new dress shop. So yes, even though it's a dress shop, there will be hats and purses and accessories and other things to be purchased there as well. So I started out making my hats. I'm kind of using a paper that's sort of like the weight of watercolor paper. Now in this instance, I used a circle template to get my shapes. But if you don't have a circle template, dolls, you can use a jar or a bottle that's the size of the brim of the hat that you're trying to make. So you're going to need a couple sizes of circles because you're going to need something to be the size of the brim and something to be the size of the top of the hat where the person's head actually goes. Now you see me here making these strips and gluing the sides together. And those are just strips of paper that I cut and measured to the size of my doll's head. Now, dolls, I use the term measure loosely because I just wrapped the strip of paper around the doll's head and cut it where it fits. Now I'm gluing the ends end to end with the Beacon's fabric fix or the fabric tack glue. And I just hold it for a couple seconds until it catches, and then I allowed it to dry. Now, dolls, I did make several of these because I really wasn't sure how many hats I wanted, but I wanted enough so I could play around with different designs and different styles. Now, I did use my Gorilla Wood glue to fill in any gaps around the edges of the top of the hat. So use your own discretion. If you cut your circles perfectly, you won't have gaps. But dolls, you know, I don't cut things perfectly, probably ever. So not only did I make hats with brims on them, but I did make sort of a couple of bonnets. And I just used a piece of flexible paper. It's actually the packaging for a little box. So I cut my little card in the shape of a triangle, and then I cut all the points off blunt. Now again, my original little triangle was one that is about the size of my doll's head because I want these to be like little close-fitting bonnets, the type that you would tie under your chin. Now I'm just covering this with a little scrap piece of fabric I had and just tucking it under neatly so I won't have any frayed ends. Now, although I was using the glue quite a bit, I was using it as sparingly as possible because I don't want any glue showing, but I do want my piece to be nice and solid and secure. Now, after the card was completely covered with the fabric, I bent it a little bit to get more of a bonnet shape. And I added a little scrap piece of lace that I had to the underside to fancy up a otherwise pretty plain piece of fabric. It still looks a little bland to me, but I'll work on it a little bit further after I get all the basics together. I'll definitely need a little piece of ribbon to tie under the doll's chin, but I think that's kind of cute. So let me set it aside and allow it to dry. Now here's one of the little paper hats. It's all dry, and I'm adding a little fabric fix because I'm about to add my fabric. Now, dolls, I didn't do anything real fancy. I just grabbed a piece of scrap fabric and just began to squeeze it around the top of the hat. Now, dolls, try to arrange it as smoothly as possible while the glue is still flexible. Now, I'm using the fabric tack or the Beacon's glue to smooth on my fabric. Be deliberate at this stage and make sure you make your adjustments while the glue is pliable. Now, I went on to repeat this process more than once with several different types of fabric. Now, this one, because the fabric was a little bit finer, I used my tweezers to kind of pinch it around the top of the hat to get that kind of gathered look. And it was a little bit bigger piece of a scrap, so I had a little bit more to cut off after I put the glue under the brim. So again, dolls, work very deliberately and take your time. So dolls, definitely use a piece of scrap that's appropriate for the size of your project. This piece was way too big. At a point, I felt like I was too far gone. I just went with it. So now I have to wait until after the hat was dry before I trimmed it. Now here I am just trying it on my assistant to see how it fit. So while that's drying, I went on to make another bonnet in a different color, but I used the same triangle technique with the triangle points cut off. Now with this one, I did it a little bit different. The fabric is a little bit darker, and I used a light type of trim, and I went on to add some additional trim to the back of it. I felt a little bit more sure about how I wanted this one to look, so I went a little bit further in my design. After I was comfortable with the shape of it, I went on to add a small scrap of velvet ribbon as the necktie. And now it's time for me to test it out on my doll to make sure that it fits nicely. I think this one turned out really cute and it fits her perfectly. So dolls, just so you know, I'm a real sucker for sparkly, glittery, shiny things. So I had this piece of gold ribbon that I just couldn't resist. So I used it on one of the smaller little lids. I didn't put a brim on it. I simply covered the crown of the hat with the gold ribbon. Then I found a smaller piece of ribbon to wrap around the edge of the crown. I thought it looked really, really cute, and I set it aside to dry. Now, while it was drying, I went back to the little floral hat and began to add purple feathers to it. Now, I thought this was really a lot of fun. This was the part I had been waiting for, and I just put a glob of the Fabric Fix glue along the bottom of the crown of the hat and just begin to press in some of the plumes from the feathers. And I kind of wanted it to look a little bit full, a little bit dramatic. So I just played with it until it looked good to me. I really, really thought that purple brought out the colors that were already in the fabric that was a little muted and kind of plain. And I found a little scrap of that same purple lace that I used on Marguerite's dress. And I had some dried purple flowers. These are some flowers actually left over from a floral arrangement from my father's memorial service in December. I thought they were kind of nice and they were really small and tiny, so I thought they were perfect for one of my miniature projects. I'm really glad I was able to use them on these hats. And then I found another little piece of purple ribbon that I arranged into a little loop design and tucked it in there with those purple flowers, and found a small piece of jewelry that was broken and put on there for an accent. I thought that came out cute. So I went back to the original hat and I began to add red feathers to it. I was really having a good time with the feathers, and the more that I added, the more I wanted to add, and I just kept going until I was satisfied with the fullness. So I'm just going to sit that down and allow that to dry. So then I went on to make a lace hat. Now, dolls, as I mentioned before, I really like girly things. So from sparkles to lace to glitter, I love it all. So I definitely had to have a couple lace hats. Now, again, this is some of the lace that I used in some of my blouses in the shirts and blouses video. Now, if you haven't seen that video, I will leave a link in the description below so you can see that video. But I just wrapped the lace around the crown of the hat, and then I filled in the top of the crown with just a small piece of lace. I did 2 layers because you could still see quite a bit of the white card, and I didn't want it to look thin and skimpy. So dolls, let this be an example to you. Sometime when you're using materials or fabrics such as lace or something sheer, sometimes you do have to do more than 1 layer. So use your discretion to create your own designs. Now, after I thought I had adequate coverage and it was shaped properly, I allowed it to dry a little bit before I trimmed off the excess around the top of the crown. When the glue was firm and I was sure it wouldn't separate, I began to trim it very closely around the crown to give it a nice, neat shape and just trim off any kind of stray pieces. And I thought that looked really cute. Now, although I really liked the shape of the hat, it needed something to just bring it up so it wouldn't look so bland. So I had some mauve colored little rosettes, and I thought they looked nice. They were kind of sheer, and I had 3 of them, so I glued them all across the front of the hat, and I thought that looked really nice. I'm really enjoying using all these odds and ends and scraps and remnant pieces from other projects on these little hats. I just love small projects like this because it's really satisfying to see things that look like they didn't go with anything come together and make something lovely. All these odds and ends I'm using, I guess this video falls into my trash to treasure category. And I'm just trimming out that inside part that was left over from the excess lace inside the hat so that my doll's head will be able to fit. And dolls, you definitely can trim this ahead of time, but I generally wait because I don't want to cut it too short. I'm really happy with the hat. I did think of a little hat band. I didn't like that particular piece. I ended up using a really soft velvet color to go around the edge of the hat. I thought that looked a lot prettier, and it actually, to me, looked more in keeping with the mood of the hat. Very soft, very romantic, very delicate. So let's move on to this blue lace hat. Now, although this one was lace, I did it slightly different. I added the glue, and then I just began to lay the lace around the rim of the hat, and I pinched it with my tweezers, trying to get a more gathered effect because of the issue that I had with the peach colored lace. I didn't want it to look thin, so I was trying to bunch it up and gather it around a little bit closer together around the rim and at the base of the crown of the hat. Now this did take some time, dolls. Use your tweezers carefully. This video is sped up, so it did take me a lot longer than what it looks like, but take your time if you want to create this particular effect. After I've got it gathered nicely around the base of the crown, I began to wrap another layer of lace around it as well. While I was allowing that to dry, I cut a strip that I was going to wrap around the base, and I cut a piece that I was going to put on the crown. So I added 2 layers to the crown so that it would be covered just like I had to do with the peach hat. And so I double layered it like that and allowed that to dry. Now this is basically the same way that I did the peach hat. I just did it in a different sequence. While I allowed the crown to dry, I added glue to the bottom of the rim and then folded my lace in. And tucking it inside the hat, again, I cut it too long, so I do have quite a bit that I'm going to have to cut. So dolls, this is definitely one of those moments where things are looking really pre-K, but no worries, it's going to turn out really cute in the end. Now, after I allowed the bottom of it to dry, I went on to trim off some of the part of the crown that I had wrapped around, but I did trim me a thin piece to put around the base of the crown, if that makes sense. So you see I'm trimming off the top and rounding that off. So it already looks a little better, a little bit neater. But do you see the top of the crown that still needs to be covered? So here I am adding some glue to the base of the crown so that I can add a thin strip of lace to cover the sides of the crown of the hat. Now take your time. You want to wrap this as tightly and as neatly around the base of the crown as you can. And I actually did 2 go-rounds because I wanted to make sure none of the white part of the card of the hat was showing. If you need to do more than 2 layers, do so, but make sure you do it tightly and neatly so that it looks finished and not scrappy and straggly. Now, I did play with it a little bit to make sure all the ends were nice and tight and down. I didn't want anything popping up or lifting up. I wanted everything to look smooth and neat. And then I went on to trim out the extra that was left on the inside of the hat. Take your time. Don't cut the paper. Just cut the lace out. Now, if you want to add extra finishing to the inside of your hat, you're definitely welcome to do that. You can do that with paper or with some other type of fabric. Now, again, I like the little hat, but I do think it needs a little bit something extra. So I'm going to add this taupe colored trim around the rim of the hat and around the base of the crown. I think it's going to add a really nice touch and really kind of define the shape of the hat and make it look a little bit more finished. And here I am adding a dab of glue around the edge. Now I am going to put it around the brim, but I want it to hang down. I'm not allowing it to lay on top. I'm allowing it to hang down toward the doll's face. I thought that looked really cute. I think that I might allow this to be my assistant's hat. She's been really great helping me with this project, and I think this hat really goes nicely with her blue dress, and it actually has the same type of trim. But before I present it to her, let me go on and add the extra and see what else I have in my bag of possibilities. I feel like it needs some color, something to really bring it up and finish it off. And although I really like these flowers and the kind of romantic look, I feel like they're too muted and too plain. So they need a little help. Now, dolls, when it got to this point, I'm just allowing you to watch me play. I had several different options as to what to do to embellish this hat further. And so I just played around with some of my options. And that's what you have to do sometimes, dolls. You don't always have it all figured out. But if you have a lot of different things that you could consider, you just want to try them all to see what looks best to you and to just see what's pleasing to your eye. So I just began to lay the little flowers along the brim and along the crown of the hat just to see if I liked it. And I liked the way that purple and the little green in the petals played off of the blue and the taupe in the trim. So I decided this was the look I wanted to go for. And even though I liked the flowers, I felt like they needed something in the centers. So I found these little plastic flowers that had come off of something else I had, but I thought the color was too plain, so I painted them purple. Now, dolls, this would definitely be a moment where I would say, do as I say and not as I do. Don't ever paint above your finished fabric projects. It is just not a good idea. Your paint could splatter, and all your hard work will be ruined with one splat of paint. So don't ever do that, dolls. So here I've added my Beacon's glue, and I'm tucking the little flowers in at the base of the crown on the rim. Now make sure you have enough glue, but not so much that it'll show up or be visible after you've added your flowers. Just enough to tack it down and catch it, and be careful of those strings. Now, while my petal flowers were drying, I went on to look into those ones that I had painted. And although I painted them and they were on the ends of those stems, they weren't going to work really well on the ends of the stems. So I cut them off so I could place them right into the centers of those purple fabric petals. So dolls, this is the instance where I'm letting you see where all your scraps and remnants really do come in handy. Often I seem to accumulate things that appear to be worthless, things that nobody else sees value in. Now I know that the value was clear, but the time had not come yet. So let me go ahead and finish this little gold hat off. Now I had another little random scrap of gold netting that I had no idea what I would ever do with, but I never had the heart to throw it away. So I added a little glue and pinned it down to dry. And then I found a little broken piece of an old earring I had, and I thought that would look cute as the centerpiece on this hat. So I added another glob of the Beacon's glue, added the little earring, and then clamped it down with those little tiny clothespins I have, and I clamped it down to allow it to dry. So I have one last hat to show you, dolls. This was actually a rosette on a dress years ago that I had, and it was always really pretty to me, but it never looked like a rosette on the dress. It always looked like the little hat to me. So I'm going to try to glue it to the top of one of my hat frames and make it into a doll hat. Now, it's a very unusual, almost a radical style, but I thought it would really look cute in the dress shop, and it would look like something that was new in fashion that nobody had ever seen before. So I glued it to the top of the hat base with the Beacon's glue, shaped it around so that it would lay on the brim really nicely. And after I shaped it to the brim, I added a little glue to the underside and added some peach-colored lace to lay next to the colorful hat as a trim around the edge. Now, dolls, this lace was straight, so I had to lay it around in a circular fashion so that it would lay neatly around the brim and it would follow the circle form around the inside of my hat. I did have to take my time, and I did use the tweezers to help me make the little folds and tucks. But again, I thought it turned out really nice because it looked cute and it looked like it was a part of the original design for the hat. So I just want you dolls to see that you can make miniatures from absolutely anything. You just have to develop the eye of a miniaturist where you can see things other people just can't see. And after I finished adding the lace to the underside, I trimmed it off, and I used my assistant to come over and try the hat on to kind of get a feel for how the hat would look on someone. And I think it's really cute. It's very dramatic. It's truly a statement maker as a hat. Kind of falls over her eye. I think that's really, really cute and a whole lot of fun. And dolls, I know the hat is pretty flamboyant and probably looks like it's even past the Victorian style hat. I still think it needed a little bit more. I felt like could use a few flowers. So that's exactly what I did. I pulled out a few more of those flowers on stems and I cut them off the stems, added a little glue to the folds in the fabric, and tucked the flowers in. And just like that, I have another lovely hat to go in the dress shop. Now, dolls, if you enjoyed this video today, definitely let me know in the comments. Also, like, share, and subscribe. And I'm looking forward to seeing you, dolls, on the next episode of Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye-bye now, dolls.